This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 with Maine Republican gubernatorial nominee Bobby Charles.
So do you think the millionaire tax is going to help us getting top-notch surgeons or CEO of companies or other people bringing investments into the state?
One of the problems we've got here is we've taken our eye off the ball. If you think that you can just tax your way to success, you misunderstand the way a state economy works. I think you're talking about the fact that they just raised 2% surcharge on what they call millionaires. That's a complete misunderstanding of the Maine economy. First of all, if you look at the basic analysis that was done by the Maine Policy Institute and some other economic groups, that's going to chase between 3 and 7% of our top earners out of the state. I did my own analysis, and it looks like it's going to cost us between 8,000 and 16,000 jobs. It's chasing the tax base out of the state. Already, we lose between 300 and 400 businesses a year. We also lose a lot of citizens who decide that if they can just stay a couple more days in Florida, they get no income tax. You may end up with no property tax. They're in a position where they've got all the benefits of a free market economy without any of the weight and the dragging along of these bowling balls of illegal immigration and housing for everybody, and nobody has to work, but you'll all get Maine care. No, these are nonsensical policies. These are policies that actually hurt the average working Mainer. So when you raise the income tax by 2%, you are going to be driving people either completely out of business. They're going to say, well, you know what, I'm done. I've run a business for a long time. My margins are down. I'm going to close up shop. Or they're going to say what a lot of small businesses, if you have 20 people working for you and you have a sudden increase of 2% in your income tax because suddenly LLCs and S-Corps, which are small businesses, make up more than 90% of Maine's business community. Those businesses, many of them are called millionaires because it's a pass-through. And they're not millionaires. They're just people who hire people and are trying to make a living, maybe doing some small thing. Maybe they're making crafts. Maybe they're doing blueberries. Maybe they're a small distributor or retailer or something. They're just trying to make it. So what we've done is we've disincentivized them to keep growing. And in fact, the way that you pay for that additional 2%, if you're in business, and I was in business 25 years, the number one cost you have for every single business everywhere in the world is labor. So what you do is you got 20 people, you cut 2 of them, and now you can pay your income tax. Well, that's not helping the state of Maine. You're chasing those people away. A lot of young people talk to me all the time, and we have huge following among the young people. Not just the Turning Point crowd, but people who want good jobs. They want to stay here. They love Maine. But you know what they do? They jump next door to New Hampshire, and there's no income tax, and they're good to go. So they can build a home. They can buy a home. My vision of this state is we want young people to be building businesses. We want businesses to be growing. We want to be building more ships. We want to be building new sectors like the cross-laminate timber industry or lobster processing. We want to take so many of the regulations away that people want to get into lobstering. They want to get into logging. We want to get the logging industry to have markets, so we want more biomass. We want to build out some of the manufacturing. So how do you do that? You revamp the tax code and you incentivize people not only to stay here, but to come here. I want to see an ambassador at large, and maybe it'll be one of the former candidates, go out around the world and bring back businesses. I'm already talking to businesses that can do small modular nuclear, people who can do cross-laminate timber, people who can buck up the existing maritime industries. I want this state to be the model of this is how America was built. This is how it looks when you have a healthy state with low energy costs. We got a 25-point plan to drop energy costs by 40%. I want to get the waste and fraud and abuse out of here. I want to take $1 billion out of the budget the very first year. Not very hard since she's grown it by $6.44 billion. I want us to get back to the point where we're incentivizing work. We're not disincentivizing it. Instead of being a magnet for legal and illegal everybody to come to Maine and get something free and don't work, let's do the exact reverse. Let's make this the place where if you want to make it in Maine, like when we were all growing up, you want to go out, want to work hard, you feel that being resilient and being strong is a good thing, not being weak and dependent, where you believe self-reliance is a value that you want to incorporate into yourself. We all did this in the military. You wanted to take responsibility. You didn't say no. You said yes. I wanted to prove myself. When I was growing up, started working full-time at the age of 12, the last thing I wanted was either of those 2 World War II vets that I knew who hired some of us to build houses and do things. I never wanted them to come back to my mom and say he didn't work hard enough. I wanted him to say to my mom when she saw him in the general store, your son's the hardest working guy on my crew. Man, that's what we lived for. We need to get back to the idea that smaller government, together with tax incentives for hard work, the idea that you can get rich in the state of Maine. Imagine that concept, that you can raise a family in the state of Maine, that you can trust the school system because the woke garbage is out of there. You can actually imagine your kid's going to learn to read and write and do math and know history and know science. And by the way, know the difference between boys and girls. All of that stuff that we grew up with that is strong-minded. We want strong-minded young citizens. We want strong-minded older citizens. We want people who don't get disincentivized because they're on a fixed income or they're on some benefit or a disability. We don't want them disincentivized. If you've got energy at the age of 80 and you want to start a company, by God, come to Governor Charles because I will help you start that company. I want this state to be all about radiating strength, radiating prosperity, radiating growth. And part of that is radiating accountability. I was a federal investigator for 5 years. We live in a state where everything is sort of sloughed off by the government. Literally, if you call DHHS, you'll be put on hold and you'll be asked to talk to a computer or talk to some dentist office music for 20 minutes before you even get to anybody, okay? That's not an accountable, responsible state. And then, God knows, this is a place where we lost 150 kids because of complete incompetence. It's horrifying. We shouldn't lose one child, okay? Then you got a DHHS that also doesn't give a damn, in my opinion, about positive, strong, outcome-oriented drug addiction services. You don't give away needles and expect that someone's going to stop using the drugs. Let's use a little logic here. I've done this a large part of my life. I love the people that throw their lives at getting others into recovery, and many of those people went through recovery themselves. We need to think about what is real compassion. Real compassion isn't giving you a bunch of stuff on the government side and imagining you're going to be happy. No, it is giving you the dignity and the self-respect and the self-reliance and the sense of personal responsibility that make you happy with yourself. And you do that a lot of ways. One thing is you got to get these kids off the drugs and in a get well, stay well plan. Part of that is supporting law enforcement. Law enforcement can stop the fentanyl and the meth and the crack cocaine and the carfentanil. All these drugs that come into Maine, they're not made in Maine. They come in from outside Maine. We need to fortify our border at the north, and we need to take these folks off I-95 after they get up through Lawrence and Lowell. This is not a mystery. We know where all these drugs come from. And I will tell you bluntly, as a 10-year naval intelligence officer who worked much of my life with the law enforcement community, we know exactly where the meth is coming from, where the fentanyl is coming from, where the crack cocaine kilo loads are coming from, highest purity heroin ever in this state now. We know where it's coming from. It's coming from specific hubs in Boston, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York. And it all comes up through 95. We need to empower our law enforcement community, not start accusing them of this and that and the third thing, but empower them, give them their authority back, give them the pay level so that we get recruiting, we get retention, we can bring laterals in. And then we need to stop this sanctuary city baloney and allow the federal law enforcement community, ICE and DEA, to cooperate very closely, give them their undercover plates. What person in their right mind would take away undercover plates, which is what Pingree and Bellows and Mills did, when 750 of the biggest takedowns last year required undercover officers, okay? You can't do a counter-narcotics operation without undercover. So you empower the law enforcement community at the federal level, you link them to the state level, you empower the state level troops. We have some of our troops are down by 50%. You get them up to full strength. You then empower the local law enforcement community. You bring in federal money through the HIDA process, through DEA, through Office of Justice programs, through OJJDP. This is the stuff that a governor should be doing. And it's not rocket science. It's very basic stuff. It just takes effort, and it takes work, and it takes knowledge, and it takes a commitment that these things matter. We get those pieces back in place again. This will be a prosperous state economically. It will be safe. Your kids will be able to ride their bikes again until supper, and you won't have to worry about what's going on out there. Our school system will be teaching real things, including the trades, including shop, or we used to call it shop, IA, home economics, the stuff that makes a family work. You're going to have income levels that allow people to buy houses and rent until they can save the money to buy the house. This is the way that America was built. And actually, this is the way Maine was built. And the thing that's happened is the socialists have gotten in there, and the corrupt crowd that's all the insider elite, the Pingrees and the Janet Mills and all these folks that all have family members that all profit and all think they're royalty. Baloney. You're not royalty. The royalty is the sovereignty of the individual Mainer who's working every day to just pay the energy bill, the property taxes, and feed their kids. And you know what? If we can't support those people, we have to support those people. That's who we are, and we have to make it work for those people.
After this interview was recorded, we reached back out to Bobby Charles by phone to discuss the recent incident in Biddeford. What's your reaction to the recent fatal shooting involving United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Biddeford?
I have been working with law enforcement for decades. And let me start by saying whenever there is a loss of life, it is tragic. It's tragic for everybody involved. So my first thing I just want to tell you is it hurts to hear that there has been a shooting like this. The second thing is we don't know all the facts. And I hate to say it, but it may be weeks or longer before we actually know all the facts. So what you have to do, I was a former federal investigator, litigator, and I worked alongside law enforcement all over the world. You have to wait until the facts are fully known. And right now I have confidence that the state police, the attorney general, the federal law enforcement officials, they're all involved in this process. And we will understand what has happened and we follow the facts wherever they lead. That's going to be true at the state level when you're talking about fraud, and it's true in a shooting of this kind. You invariably put everything aside and you follow what the facts show, whether standard operating procedure was followed, why it happened, etc. So at this moment, I'm a big believer in due process, and we have to let the process unfold the way it should.
There has been reports that there were no body-worn cameras. Do you know the status of that report?
I don't, but I will tell you I have strong opinions as an individual who, again, has worked closely with law enforcement for decades. Just going back a step for a minute, I felt that masks were not a great idea at the front end of everything because transparency, trust in law enforcement is important. I felt that, frankly, going after the people who were doxing agents would have been a much better approach. I personally think that there's some blame in general when a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city has cut off law enforcement. In other words, the reason we didn't have shootings like this previously is that sanctuary states didn't exist. And the way that it operated was that you'd have state and local law enforcement pick somebody up on a judicial warrant, and it was a very non-dramatic event, and they'd be in a jail, and there would be a handoff to ICE afterwards in a very non-dramatic way. But on the cameras, this is another point of difference I have. I don't know whether they were wearing them, and it looks like they weren't. I will just say that I believe body cameras are important. I believe they have a very valuable function, both for the victims of crime and or those that would argue on that side, and on the other side for the law enforcement officer community. I believe that body cameras are a way to incontrovertibly identify what happened. And recreation of crime scenes is a complicated process, but one of the things that makes it easy is if you have a body camera. So I am a plain vanilla. I support law enforcement, but I also am a man who believes very strongly in the Constitution. I taught it. I litigated it. I believe that we need to follow this process wherever it leads. And I do believe that body cameras would have made this easier.
Let's pivot to Lewiston. Reportedly, there was 19 gun violence incidents in the first half of 2026. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we come now to expect that from places like Lewiston, and it's not just Lewiston. In the last several years, we've had more than 200 shootings. There were also more than 1,500 overdoses over there. I'm over in Lewiston a lot because it's not that far from where I live, and I always go over and talk to people because I want to understand what's really happening. I was in Kennedy Park just, 2 days ago. It's a sad turn of events. Lewiston had a tough time, and then they came out of it, and in my youth, they began to get really strong. They had brought in a lot of businesses. People didn't fear for themselves when they walked the streets or for their kids when they walked the streets at night. Those shootings, believe it or not, I've done ride-arounds with the police. They will point out all over the place where the gunshots are in the buildings. It's unfortunate. I mean, I hesitate to even say this on air, but it goes beyond sidearms. There are rifles out of windows and things. So it's a bad environment right now. It is not normal Maine. It is not normal, period. It is not what we want. There's 2 or 3 different elements of that. There's a lot of drug trafficking in Lewiston that we have to attack, and we have to get literally addiction centers. I've gone through the warming centers that have a throughput of maybe 600 in the winter. I've gone through, talked to them. They're very supportive of me, actually. I think they know I'm going to change it out, and we're going to get real addiction services in there. We're going to up-power law enforcement. We're going to get the linkages back between the state, the local, and the feds in order to help take down some of these big groups. That's one piece of the equation, the drug traffickers that come in from outside. A second piece is a youth problem. You have shootings that are related to a robbery or a burglary or a drive-by shooting. Unfortunately, many of them don't even get reported. There are drive-by shootings in Lewiston every single night. on a stack of Bibles every single night. And it's a very disturbing turn. The police are trying to do everything they can, but there's fear about reporting one. You report it, you're known, now you might be a target. But the second part of that is that by the time you get there, they've gone. So a lot of this is youth-related violence, that these kids don't have jobs, they don't have purpose, they don't have a direction. Drug addiction is part of it. Part of it is outwardly crime-related, as in there are robberies and there are holdups and there are shootings. And there was one recently, thank God it was not fatal, but there were 2 people shot in the face, I think. It's a very disturbing turn for a wonderful city that needs to come back to its old roots and a sense of connection. And the last piece, honestly, is the assimilation piece. We have people there that are not working, who don't seem to feel part of the larger ethos of hard work in Maine. And my view is attitude is a thing you can change. And once you change attitude, you change behavior. So my feeling is, as a Christian, as a believer in the idea that every human being is a soul that is vital and is God's child, we need to think in terms of how do we help each of those 3 areas? How do we get the drug traffickers out and drug addiction services in? How do we get the youth on track so that we've got good jobs and hardworking young people, and they begin to think more of themselves and they begin not to want? And part of that is education. Part of that is workforce. Part of that is tax policy. Part of that is infrastructure. Part of that is getting an integration of the parents into the system. And then the last piece is assimilation. And the Somali community is very big in Lewiston, but this is a radiating problem. This is a problem of social fabric disintegration. And I guess if you really want to think about it, because you find some of these problems also in Waterville and Augusta and Bangor and South Portland and Point South, we have a cultural collapse that we need to address. And how do you get back to that? Well, you can come back to those 12 values in the Scout Law, or you can come back to the idea that we actually know what the wheel looks like. We know what a society that is functional and safe and prosperous, and young people feel a sense of direction, and parents are playing a big role in the family, and the family's being rewarded for being a family, and the school system is teaching real things, and those real things are producing outcomes that allow someone to go buy a house or rent a house. We know what that society looks like. It's just that we have drifted very far away from the dock, and we need to grab the line before we lose it and pull that boat back into the dock, and we need to get it back to where it belongs. And again, I have detailed plans in every one of these areas, but what you're seeing in Lewiston is emblematic of what's happened a lot in the state, and I am going to go back to the Augusta insiders. In my opinion, they don't give a darn about what's happening, and I do. I wake up every morning worried, confident that we can do it, but worried about the future of the state. And when I say the future of the state, it does mean seniors who are struggling to health care and housing and just a sense of no anxiety because you know you've saved all your life or you're on a fixed income, you're going to make it. But it also is the youth. And a big problem in Lewiston is an alienation, and we got to get over that. Look, I go into Lewiston and I talk to the young people. I talk to the Somali community. I talk to them in parks. I talk to them everywhere I can find them, coffee shops. And their analysis of the problem is not very different from my analysis. They see it. When I've met with, and I mentioned in one of the debates, I spent some time with 4 young Somali kids who, they were in high school. They're coming toward the end of their high school years. And I was asking them, what do you want to do with your life? And it was amazing. I probably spent an hour talking to them. One of them wanted to be a lawyer. One wanted to be a real estate broker. One wanted to start a business. And I can't remember what the 4th one wanted. And I said, so how much of your peer group looks at the world the way you do? And they said, not that much. I mean, literally like 60 or 80%, they're just part of the environment where crime is rampant and the drugs are rampant and there's no sense of hope and there's no sense of direction and there's no sense of expectation. The only expectation is that the state will take care of them. And I said, so what makes you different? Why are you guys so destined for success? And they are. And they said, our parents, actually. Our parents believe in the American dream. So I want every Maine kid and every Maine parent to believe in the American dream. And by God, I will make it happen as governor.
So these detailed plans that you have, do they require the House and the Senate approval? Because if you don't win both the House and the Senate, where are you going to be?
Yep. So the answer is we will succeed. We need the House and the Senate to legislate a lot of these things that need to happen. We need to change the tax code. That's going to require legislation. We need to get the school system back in shape. A lot of that will at least be benefited in a more permanent way by legislation. We need to get the energy costs down. I have an omnibus bill I'm working with Jim Lebrecht. It's a 25-point bill. It's very detailed, but we get that one bill out there and we'll drop costs by 30 or 40% for electricity. And that'll be the start. From there, we'll continue. Yes, we need the House and the Senate in the most fundamental way. I will tell you, go out, even before you do any work for me, go out and help your local representative Republican candidate win, because there's 151 House members and 35 Senate members, 186 total. If you cut that in half and add one, that's the majority. The majority of 186 is what controls the constitutional officers. We're a very unusual state in that regard. So that means if we can get a Republican legislature, they will pick the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, the Treasurer, and the non-constitutional officer, which is the auditor. They will control that. So if I can get the legislature and those constitutional officers, we will completely change the state in a permanent way. We can begin getting rid of ranked choice voting. We can begin getting the tax code right. We can begin encouraging young people here. We can get these tax exemptions to stay indefinitely. We can restructure the state so that it is a culture that rewards hard work and rewards good decision-making and good moral decision-making and all the rest of it, instead of creating this vicious cycle where you overspend, overtax, overregulate, and run the tax base out of the state. If I do not have that legislature, as a lawyer, I'm a Maine lawyer, but I'm also a New York lawyer. I have different jurisdictions, and I've taught law at Harvard. I know a lot about how the relationship between an executive at the state level and the legislative branch interact, as well as a judiciary. I'll probably be signing executive orders every single week for the duration, and I'll start out with a stack of them because I will have the executive authority to make decisions related to the Department of Education, DHHS, and 15 other departments. Those fall under the jurisdiction of a governor. There are people that are going to say, well, you've overstepped, and that's fine. You can tell me that. There is a gray area between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and while I will work very hard with the legislative branch to bring them around to what I'll call common sense thinking on a lot of this. And actually, I've talked with probably 24 Democrat legislators who, strangely enough, also think property taxes are too high. They just don't connect the dots and realize that they and their predecessors are why they're so high. Maybe we can work on that. Maybe we can work on drug addiction. Maybe we can work on support for law enforcement. Maybe we can work on getting the needles out of here. Maybe we can work on getting energy costs down. I think one of the things that's happening is the truth is a very powerful thing, and sometimes it gets thrown out there like a boomerang, comes back and hits you in the back of the head. Some of this stuff like wild-eyed green programs that actually are costing the everyday constituent more and more and more money, your own constituents are going to come to you and say, look, I love the idea of clean water and clean air and all that, and I'm all for you on that, but I don't think that I can continue to pay for these folks over on the coast to have all these solar panels, and I really am about done with you blowing the tops off my mountains so that we can put more wind turbines in that have a 15% or 30% capacity rate. I might work down in Arizona, but it's not working here. So what you do is you work with these common points with a legislature. I don't know that there's a legislator, at least not a rational legislator on the Democrat side, who really believes, I hope they don't, that NAEP scores that put us at the bottom of the nation in reading and math is somehow a good thing. That's not a good thing. I've gotten calls from Democrats since the primary that blow my mind. I had a call 2 days ago from an older man and woman who said they knew someone that I knew. They'd never even met me before. They see my stuff on Facebook. They both max donated $2,075 on the phone at the moment, just like that. And they're Democrats. I said, we've been lifetime Democrats. I said, could you just help me to understand what it is that is bringing you to me? And I'm grateful, of course. That's an amazing thing. BobbyForMaine.com. Please put anything you can there. It helps me get forward and leverage the national money. But they named individual issues, in particular the tax issues. But they also said, basically, we were Democrats. We see the Democratic Party a certain way, and that's not the party that we see in Maine. It's progressive, whatever that is. It seems socialist. It's pushing us away. And it's pushing us toward you, because you're talking about lower the taxes, lower the overall regulatory burden, make it more livable, make it safe, make us so we don't have to worry about holding our homes, make it so that our kids, and in their cases, their grandkids, would stay in the state of Maine. Give us schools we can trust so that there isn't this tip in the direction of everybody having to homeschool or go to a private school, or give us an opportunity to come back to the Maine that we grew up with. And I say, to be honest, you're exactly right. These are not things that anybody should not expect. We should expect all these things from our government. So this is like one of those jigsaw puzzles that you dump out at Christmas and the pieces are all over the table. We have the pieces to make Maine one of the most prosperous, one of the absolutely best, most prosperous states in the Union. We have an unbelievable state. We have natural resources. We have people who have a history of hard work. We have an infrastructure that does need a lot of work. It does need a lot of work, but it's an infrastructure that has worked before, and we can get it back. And the truth is, it's like what I tell large groups of people, and particularly high school kids, life is composed of 3 basic tasks. If you follow these 3 tasks, you will succeed in life. The first is you have to envision what you want to see happen. You have to have the imagination. And I tell them, you want to be an astronaut? You want to be a fighter pilot? You want to be a school teacher? You want to raise a family of 15 kids? I don't care what you want to do. Envision it first. Make it something that lives in your mind. Second, believe it can actually be you. You want to be a downhill skier in the Olympics and you think it's wonderful and it's very exciting and you can imagine it and you see it. But then there's the second step. That's believe it can be you. Take it internally and say no matter what anybody says to you, they say you're crazy to start a business or you're crazy to try to build your own house. Ignore them. Ignore them. Believe it can be you. And the last critical piece that Mainers were so good at is work as if the entire thing depended on you and you alone. And when you fall down or you miss a payment or something doesn't work right, get back up on your feet, redouble your effort. And this is what we, of course, learned in the military, but it also works in the civilian sector and it works in the private sector. Get out there and work every single day. And when you go to sleep at night, go to sleep like a wet dish rag, like you've given all the energy you can in a day. And you know what? You will go to sleep happy, you'll wake up happy the next day, and it'll empower you to achieve the dream you want to achieve. We're not even trying to do that in this state. But that is what makes success. That's why, for example, on the political front in Kentucky, they were all blue, and now both of their legislatures are supermajority red. Same thing in Florida, same thing in Texas. There's no reason in the world Maine cannot be the example of hard work and a good moral compass and remembering where true north is and making it happen. And our kids, it'll be like a magnet. Kids will stay here, they will work here, they will start businesses here. They will be happy. And you know what? That's the government. The government isn't going to solve your problems. All it's going to do is give you the conditions under which you can solve your own problems.
I know one of the biggest concerns that we have in the state of Maine is education. What's your plan on that?
Education, in many ways, is the first cause of whether we succeed or we fail. If the education system fails to produce graduates from high school and encourage those to go on either into the trades or college or somewhere else, and of course the colleges have to be, and the University of Maine has to be equally determined to get this outcome. If we produce an outcome of students that are highly capable, enthused to go out and work hard, have the skill sets, know how to read, how to do math, anything they want to do, they know how to do it because we've given that wind in their sails, which is what happened to all of us, which is why we're successful in doing the various things we're doing, we will succeed. What that means is we'll have a labor force that wants to work. We'll have a labor force that's healthy. We'll have folks that begin to make money. And then when they begin to make money, they'll have a family or they'll build a home or they'll buy a piece of land and then build a home and they'll stay in the state because we have this prosperous, I call it a virtuous cycle. We'll get them on the virtuous cycle. It all starts with education. That starts literally K through 12 and then beyond that. If we don't do that, which is what's happened in this state, if we believe that somehow ideology brainwashing kids into thinking they can be boys or girls and that they can be God or that they should fear for whatever their sexuality is and they should define their whole self by sexuality or they really don't need any skill sets, they could just depend on the state, or when they graduate they just jump on Maine Care and they don't have to work and they don't have to do anything and they watch the internet and they can imagine that they just watch the internet and they're going to become a millionaire. That's all baloney, okay? It's just baloney. It's a failure. And I guess I'll go a step further. I'll admire the problem for one more minute. When we went through school, a lot of the schools in Maine were unaccredited. The high school that I went to was unaccredited. But I had a combination of veterans who were teaching, who wanted us to succeed, that knew hard life and wanted us to be successful. Older people like my mom, who taught for 40 years in Monmouth. She gave her life to education. She was rewarded as a teacher. The administrative overhang wasn't so heavy on her that she was disappointed with being able to be a teacher. She didn't leave after 2 or 3 years. By the way, teachers in this state often leave after 2 or 3 years. They're just demoralized. We have one of the lowest morales for teachers, one of the lowest pays for teachers. What's happened in the state of Maine, to kind of explain it in a nutshell, is we've de-emphasized the importance of outcomes in education. We have to re-emphasize concrete objective outcomes, and that's learning the trades, that's learning skill sets, that's getting the right attitude, that's getting the right moral compass. We don't need to be indoctrinating kids anymore. We should never have been doing it in the first place. We don't need to be creating little socialist dependents. We need to create hardworking, enthusiastic, America-loving, work-loving, business-loving, family-loving people who end up being productive members of society and then in turn pass that on to the next generation, the next generation. So how do you get there? You have to look directly into the eye of the storm, and you have to understand what's going on. The Department of Education in Augusta is pushing out a curriculum that is literally putting our kids on a road to demise, a road to failure. We need to get that curriculum back and put it right. And we can do that. As a governor, I can do that. We need to put a master teacher in charge of the education department, not a master bureaucrat. We need to stop all the waste and the fraud and the abuse in the Department of Education. There is a lot of it. We need to cut the administrative costs. They boosted them, I think, 20% in the last 7 years. Forget that. We need to cut the administration, the administrators and the administrative costs and the bureaucrats by at least half. And then let's keep cutting if we can. We need to do a Doge-type review of every single program that is pushed out by the Maine Department of Education. We need to return the power to the towns. I just spent a lot of time with the Maine Municipal Association. We need to stop all the unfunded mandates. We need to put the power back in the hands of the towns and the counties and the parents so that the town that loves the school and the teachers that love the kids and the parents that love the kids work together to create, in that little township, a very successful cadre of kids. That is the patchwork quilt that was Maine education. Do we need to do some infrastructure investment? We sure do, because they have done no capital investment in infrastructure in this state while Pingree and Mills and Bennett and all the rest of the crowd were in charge. We have a state that is the number 50, I believe, for infrastructure in the country. A lot of that has to do with, obviously, roads and bridges and maritime, but it also has to do with schools. So we should also be thinking near term, medium term, and long term. Near term, you meet immediate needs, you get rid of the administrators, you cut all the dead wood. We've got more administrators here than some of the states that are 4 and 5 times our size. We do not need them, okay? Get rid of them, empower the teachers, stop saying that the unions call the shots. They don't call the shots. Parents call the shots. Teachers call the shots. And frankly, there's an awful lot of teachers that feel not so fond of the teachers' unions. The teachers' unions serve themselves. The top 8 staff members at the teachers' union each make between $200,000 and $250,000. And where do they get that money? They get it out of the paychecks of teachers that are making $40,000 a year. That is wrong. It is a self-licking ice cream cone where the legislature gives them money. And then, anyway, the short answer is we need to get back to accountability. Accountability is the only way that a department, and I did this at the federal level, accountability meaning cut the deadwood, reward those who work hard, have a vision followed by objectives, followed by action items that get you to the outcome. If you miss the mark, we hold people accountable. You look at the end game. You have near-term outcomes, you have medium-term outcomes, and you have long-term outcomes. And one of the things that I'd love to see in this state is that we hit the near-term outcomes. We start to turn out kids that are very purposeful. They really want to stay in the state of Maine. They have opportunities to stay here. The teachers feel rewarded. They have more freedom. They aren't given this extra bureaucracy that they have to work till 2 a.m, 2 out of every 4 weeks in order to make some bureaucratic report get filed with the state. Stop rewarding the bureaucracy and the administrators. Start rewarding the teachers for training the kids. And then as that moves to midterm, now look at, we do have a lot of RSUs. One of the schools that I grew up in was one of the very first RSUs, actually showed up long before Angus King back in the 70s. Look at the infrastructure there. If you need to consolidate, do, but keep in mind that if we are successful long term with a reduction in income tax, a reduction in regulations, an increase in growth, a reduction in property tax burdens, a better healthcare system, an affordable housing market because you've lowered property taxes and you've used the tax code to incentivize building of private sector houses, not more public housing, but private sector houses, and you have a school system that is a quality school system, what will you get? You will get people moving to Maine, not just not moving out of Maine. They will come to Maine, and like Florida now, they will say, this is a place where my kids get a good education. They're on a track to get a good job. I live in a beautiful place, but the beautiful place isn't just being protected. It's being protected also by a structure or a culture that sees that we do need good housing and we do need no needles on the streets. And we do need good health services and we do need an infrastructure that reinforces people to stay here. What will happen is these RSUs may actually grow to such a point that you might go back and maybe have some of these towns that are consolidated, maybe restart or needed to have an elementary school that was being closed down. Maybe it needs to be reopened or kept open. And I think part of what we have to do, in the same way that I encourage individuals to think about having imagination, vision, belief, work, we need to do that as a state. As a state, we need to have a much bigger imagination about what our future can look like. Don't be disillusioned. Don't be dismayed. Don't believe that socialism and somehow government-concentrated power is going to solve all your problems. Don't do that. Instead, take responsibility individually and then expect your leadership to keep government small. Keep more money in your pocket. If my income tax plans go through, people on average will be keeping an additional $5,000 in their pocket. That's not you giving it to the government, even though we should probably restart the tax relief fund. It's not you giving it to the government because the government keeps a surplus and can give it back to you. It's you keeping it in the first place so that we don't have any of that bureaucratic extra cost of giving it back to you. If we can get to the point where we can imagine the state that we once had, which is fiscally responsible, highly prosperous, educationally focused, work-focused, safety-focused, kid-focused, and we can reinforce that, and then we can believe it can really happen, and then we can work for it, what we will have is a state that is very similar in the prosperity level that might have happened in the early 1990s. And we know that in the early 1990s, we were pro-business, we were safe, there wasn't all this drug trafficking everywhere, we had the number one best schools in the country in 1992, people wanted to move here, we didn't have any of this garbage energy stuff that's driving us into the ground. People could afford their electricity bill. They could afford their property bill. Friends of mine got out of high school, bought a piece of land, got a good job, and whether it was in a mill, and we need to restart some of those, or it was starting their own company, and they've been here the rest of their life. But now, as seniors, they're looking around going, man, what happened? So we can get back to basics, and I say it this way, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know what the wheel looks like. We just have to commit ourselves that we don't want to keep rolling around on cinder blocks. We want a wheel.
Graham Platner, what are your thoughts on that situation?
Wow. This is like commenting on a Steve Martin movie. What do we see in Graham Platner? And what do we see in the Democratic Party, which is extremely important for us to all sort of take a deep breath and see? We see that that party is all about power and opportunism. They supported a guy at the outset, knowing, long before this last rape allegation, they knew this was a guy that had a Nazi tattoo, that 9 times in 10, he knew what that was. He had been an avowed communist. He was anti-black citizens. He was anti-woman. He had already 3 allegations of physically abusing women. He had criticized a veteran for getting wounded when he came out to defend his unit. This was a lowlife guy, okay? He had lied about his past. He had lied about what he did to make money. He had created a narrative around himself. He had obviously spent too much time on the internet and created a cartoon character of himself that was not a reflection of who the guy really was. And who the guy really was, no Democrat should ever have supported. My opponents, Hannah Pingree, was very happy for his endorsement, glad to be seen with him and grateful for all these things that he was doing. And you have 20 legislators in the House who are all Democrats who said, oh, we endorse him, we think he's great. Well, that was stage 1 of opportunism. You know the guy has no right being a dog catcher, never mind being a senator. But you thought that because he had a lot of money, and he had gotten a lot of money nationally, and you thought because he had a lot of following, and you thought because he presented well, despite all these bad things about him, you thought it was going to serve your opportunistic interests to just go ahead and support him. So that's the first bankruptcy of the Democrat Party. There was nobody out there. I called on the Democrat candidates to disavow him, and nobody disavowed him. So you know the guy really has tremendous character problems, and yet they endorsed him. Now, flip the page, and the guy gets the nomination, and now, all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, come other allegations that it looks like they were held so that they could be delivered between the moment when he was nominated and the moment at which he would have to declare that he was not going to be a candidate. They deliver this raft of new epiphanies. Number one, they deliver the rape allegation. Then they deliver other character elements of his behavior. Then they go and they said that there was a Medicaid investigation that had been opened on him. Where did all these things suddenly materialize out of? I mean, how come they didn't appear prior? Well, because he was gaining a lot of money for the Democrat Party in the state of Maine. He was talking to the national leadership. If you go look at his coffers, they're really, really full, so they're going to all benefit from them. And now, opportunistic moment number 2. He is literally told you have to leave the race. And I'm told that there were license plates from just about every state sitting on his front lawn, either trying to threaten him or give him money to get out of the race, okay? And of course, now you've got this investigation and Medicaid investigation, all this stuff. So now opportunistic moment number 2 is my own inbox is being filled with things that say, hi, I'm Shanna Bellows. I'm running for the United States Senate. Hi, I'm Troy Jackson. I'm running for the United States Senate. Hi, I'm Mr. Nobody, but I'm a Democrat and I need to be the next senator. Opportunism. What Mainers hate is opportunism. And as much as I don't like Graham Platner and I disdain his character flaws, I also say the reason the guy had throw is because he's an outsider. And what are you seeing? The elite Augusta insiders are consolidating themselves in a secret meeting in order to pick the next king or queen that will fill this slot, just exactly the way they threw democracy out the window for Joe Biden. I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but the guy had gotten the nomination. They decided, like a little cobble, a little Soviet cobble, that they would throw him out and they'd put Kamala Harris in. Well, what are they doing here? They're a little Soviet cobble, these Augusta insider Democrats. And there's a lot of them that are legislators, and there's a lot of them who are former gubernatorial candidates, and there's a lot of them that put Janet Mills in there. There's a lot of them that they don't care a crap about the substance. All they care about is they want power. They want to control the United States Senate. They want to control Blaine House. They want to control the legislature. It's all about power. It has no moral fiber to it at all. And this is where the contrast comes. 85% of this state, maybe more, wants moral fiber in leadership. They may have complaints with Susan Collins, but by God, she's the second most powerful person in the United States. She has worked for Maine year after year after year. She has good moral fiber. And let's come back home to Maine. They do not want Augusta to be dominated anymore by these feckless, reckless, corrupt, incompetent, self-worshiping Democrat elites. They don't want it anymore. And honestly, that's why we were outspent 70-1. And yet people say, you know what? I need a guy who's competent, who's an outsider, who understands me, who actually doesn't have a whole lot of money. He just lives in the woods like me, and he's going to fix my problems. We have had it with these elitists. They believe they own us. And that is a sure sign that we're on the wrong path. We don't work for them. They work for us. And if they don't work for us, then throw them the heck out. And that's what we're doing. We're going to throw them out this cycle. We're going to win the legislature. We're going to win the governorship. Susan Collins is going to win. Paul LePage is going to win. I'd love to see Ron Russell win. We are in a position right now. It's an inflection point in the history of the state of Maine. This state has gotten to the point where they said, I've had it. This is enough. Please stop abusing me. You think you have the power to abuse me, and you do right now, but I'm throwing you out on your butt because we need people who work for us and who are accountable. You know, all these things fit together like puzzle pieces. Graham Platner is the example of a craven, uncompassed Democratic Party in the state of Maine that has been taken over by the progressives who believe that Marxist, Leninist, Maoist answers like Mondami down in New York are the answer. And 85 or 90%, I would even say, of Mainers do not agree with that. The people out on the bridges waving their little signs, maybe they agree with that. But this state, by and large, is ready for real leadership. And we are going to get that real leadership. And in November, when I'm elected and when the legislature turns Republican and when Paul LePage is elected, you are going to see a real turn. And what's going to happen is 2 months in, you're going to see things. 6 months in, you're going to see things. 2 years in, I foresee Democrats that are of the JFK, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton type walking the streets of Portland or even Lewiston or anywhere else and saying, you know, it's hard to admit, but I really am glad there are no needles on the streets. And I really am glad that he's given us our income tax back. And I'm really glad that my property taxes have gone down. And man, it's so great that my electricity bill isn't bankrupt me. And it's great to hear that the kids are going to stay here now. And I do realize some of those people are going to go to prison and, well, maybe they need to go to prison. If we can get back to a point where we are a high growth, high accountability state, we will all love being here and we'll stay here the rest of our lives and we'll bring people here who never even dreamed of coming to Maine, but they realize that's the way America was made. That's what we have to have. And so that's the Maine I want to see.
To be elected, you will need votes from both Democrats and unenrolled. Do you think you can pull that together?
In a stunning turn just since the primary, as I mentioned earlier, we are already getting Democrats and independents turning to us. And I'm going down. I was just down in Portland a day or so ago. I was down in Yarmouth and Portland 2 days before that, before groups that would be unlikely groups that are very supportive. And I think the reason is the realities of life are hard to turn away from. Winston Churchill once said, the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, it's right there. And it doesn't matter whether you call yourself a Democrat or an independent or a Republican or never voted before. Truth is, these realities are crippling us. And I'm not big on the fringe issues. I don't really care about a lot of the fringe issues and some of the social issues. It's not the priority. The priority right now is get Maine back to being affordable, safe, good schools, no corruption. And we look around and we go, you know what? I'm proud of my government. And I don't see a lot of people saying that right now.
So if somebody wants to get involved in your campaign, what's the best way to do that?
I would love to have people do one of three things. Go to bobbyformaine.com. You can contribute anything. I got a money order for $5 the other day, which is really extraordinary. It was like a widow's mite gift. But honestly, you can go to bobbyformaine.com. You can give up to $2,075. You can get all the position papers. You can figure out a way to connect with me. You can also connect with me on Facebook. I answer every single message behind the screen myself personally. Sometimes you get the message back at 3 a.m. a day later, but I'm there. It's me. And then the last couple of things are you can do a meet and greet or you can do a fundraiser. Again, you can reach out to me or you can reach out to Dale Kraft, who's at dale@bobbyformaine.com, or Joel Stetkis, who's at joel@bobbyformaine.com. Offer to do a fundraiser. I'll come. Get 10 or 15 friends together that care about the future of the state and come want to commit. Let's do it. And then the last thing you could do is just invite me to an event. I go to things that are tied to realtors, and I was just down at the Jewish Museum in Portland. I'll go anywhere that I can talk to people who care about the future of the state of Maine, and I don't care whether you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, doesn't matter. I will come.
Maine Republican gubernatorial nominee, Bobby Charles, thank you so much. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. A real pleasure.
Thank you. You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. The most important voices aren't always the loudest ones. They're the voices of everyday people, raising families, running businesses, serving their towns. That's who we want to hear from. Share your ideas with us online, and let's make sure those voices are never left out. Find us on Facebook or on X or at qpointpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.